This past year, I've spent a lot of time thinking about chaos. Chaos and control. If I had $1 for every minute of time I have spent meditating on the best way to manage the chaos and maintain the control, I wouldn't need to worry about all that so much, since I'd be a millionaire. My year began with the thought that perhaps the way I function is not due completely to an artistic brain, but due to a divergence. This was a new thought, not having been raised in a very medicalized household, save the fact that I was what I'd call a hospital kid due to a consistent plague of earaches and even a ruptured eardrum at one point, which landed me in and out of the hospital over and over until, at last, the aches ceased. I would, like many, go on to need braces, and not like many, I would need massive jaw surgery as well. A surgery for which my surgeon excitedly stated he had never done one like it before, much to the chagrin of 17-year-old me. But I digress. In an era of ADHD kids, not for one moment did I think it was a label for me until the ripe age of 35, and a multitude of little straws that added up to finally break the camel's back and get her to the doctor to ask, maybe? 3 appointments and a diagnosis later, and there I was, with a bottle of pills in my hand, relieved for one moment before thinking, I don't really need this, do I? And so the research began fresh. Not the cursory research of the little straws I'd built up into a diagnosis castle earlier, but the kind mainly circling around WebMD and YouTube horror stories that would lead me to an outright fear of the bottle in the cabinet, the Concerta monster. 2 of my friends were diagnosed around the same time, got their meds, took their meds, boom, lives changed, as they pointed out. Funny how all of us goths are getting late ADHD diagnoses, isn't it? And I wondered even more. Now let me just get this out of the way. I am in fact 90% certain I have ADHD. I have very strange relationships with caffeine and alcohol. I don't have an addictive personality, but I do have hyperfixations, and I always have. I can't memorize. I can't study. I can't spend more than an hour on a piece of art or a poem, or it's just not going to happen. To function, I have a print journal, a management app, multiple Google calendars, 3 different note apps, and I text myself throughout the day. I've built what my doctor calls a system. So, as I meditated on the fears of taking a medication that could cause an instant sanity break, a heart attack that may cause some level of dependency, terrified of how my system would need to change and how if I were to ever stop taking it, that I would not be able to sort that system out once again, wondering in which state was the greater evil, if I should continue as I have been or throw comfort to the wind and step into something new, a new way of being. I have instead, for the time being, decided to analyze that system, to analyze my actions and find reason behind all that I do. Reason behind my being, and that, as anyone knows, is a big question. One of the biggest, in fact. When I set out to travel in 2024, first to Oaxaca, Mexico, then to the United States, where I landed heavily in Texas, half enamored by the bigness of America, half terrified by its crime-ridden streets, quickly learning what I could and could not do in a country that is very different from Canada, I was setting out to get inspired, to shake things up, to try to be less scheduled. I didn't even completely plan the locations I would be going to or the order in which they would occur. Train and plane tickets were bought at the last minute, Airbnbs booked in a fever. What I found myself frustrated by was the fact that if I had meticulously planned, saved, and plotted, I may have been better off. But at the same time, the chaos is not something I regret. The chaos was something sorely neglected in my life, as was the travel itself. 2 things my heart hungered for, but which I was not able to truly provide. And even then, I couldn't really do it. For all the chaos in my thoughts, it is difficult to become disordered in my life. I remember when I was a teenager, always telling my parents where I was going when I went out somewhere, when many of my friends stopped doing this at a certain age. To this day, when I'm staying at one of my parents' places, I always tell them where I'm going when I leave. And that is a baseline that has followed me now around the world. The footing, the organization, the checks and balances, these are necessities for my life, something I often wish to abandon but tend to regret when I do. I suffer from a deep inability to be rebellious, which eats me up and manifests in tiny personal rebellions which affect and damage only me. When I lied to my parents about where I was going as a teenager, I took a paintball to the leg from a drive-by shooter in a not-so-great neighborhood. A paintball that gave me a bruise for the next year, and if it had hit my eye, would have blinded me. In the same year, when I took a bus instead of asking for a ride from my dad, probably because I didn't really want him to know where I was going, my friends and I were surrounded by 10 people who took the rings, headphones, and iPod off the guy I loved before holding a knife to his throat. When I took a chance in Dallas, riding a train to a distant suburb and applying the safety of Montreal to a place I'd never been before, I nearly met a similar situation to the mugging, a narrow miss as, surrounded on a train, I walked purposefully away centimeters from certain violence to the highway where I found myself in the darkness, alone, turning on precious pricey data to find a place where I could call an Uber in safety. A glowing fast food restaurant on the highway, welcome reprieve. And so, I have built systems. I've built systems that keep me safe, that keep me alive, and I've taken chances which showed me what the world can be. In a way, the chances have saved me as much as the systems have because I've learned from them. I learned from traveling. I learned from my experience in Dallas and applied it to my systems so that when I went on to new locations, I did some research, looked at some crime maps. I learned from growing up in Winnipeg how to tell when a situation is going sour long before anyone else, how to spot the threat a mile away, how to avoid eye contact, look without looking, leave quickly. So what will happen if I disturb my system, my learning, my memory? Will it build upon who I am as I have built myself so far with travel, experiences, and reflection? Do I need to shock my system as I did when I explored new countries, or is it enough to accept the diagnosis, the explanation, and examine the chaos, the cause, the control, and incorporate it into an already fine-tuned arsenal? This past year, I've spent a lot of time thinking about chaos and control. If I had $1 for every minute of time I have spent meditating on the best way to manage the chaos and maintain the control, I wouldn't need to worry about all that so much since I'd be a millionaire. But maybe that's not the case. For now, the jury is still out.